Hi everybody, it's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Today, another Terrificon panel, a fantastic discussion. And I gotta say, I was really pleased with how all the panels that I moderated turned out. I thought really great in-depth stories that you never get. Even Jim Lee, who I really didn't talk to, but he had great stories on his panel as well. Well, today's no exception. It's the DC All-In panel. And you know, for not being New York or San Diego, I think Mitch at Terrificon really lucked out and got a lot of the key players in what's coming at DC. We already heard from Mark Waid and a fantastic hour-long panel about Absolute Power. Well, Absolute Power, as you may or may not know, that event will dovetail into new status quos for not only the main line of DC books, but also the introduction of the Absolute line. New takes on the classic characters. They're going back to square one, and this will be a great jumping on point, much as the Ultimate Universe was 25 years ago at Marvel. So very interesting. What does DC have in store? Well, you're going to find out from people like Scott Snyder, who will talk very much in depth about his plans for Absolute Batman. You'll hear from Jason Aaron, who has great detail on Absolute Superman. And Phillip Kennedy Johnson, who's doing one of the mainstream books that dovetails out of Absolute Power. He's taking on Batman and Robin. And being a father himself of a 10-year-old boy, so I got to meet Phil's son, who cracked me up, great kid. And you could tell that Philip's going to have a lot of fun writing about Bruce and Damian and their family dynamic, along with other things as well. A really great discussion about the moves and shakes of DC coming in the fall from three of the key players. The DC All-In panel on today's Word Balloon. Coming to Kickstarter, it's The Legend of Kingdom Come. This feature documentary is an origin story about the beloved 90s-era graphic novel Kingdom Come, going behind the scenes and inside the minds of its creators, writer Mark Waid, and comic book art legend Alex Ross. The film traces the influence of the comics' history through the present day, exploring the roots of pop culture's most vibrant medium in the 21st century, featuring a wide range of comic luminaries reflecting on the book and the industry. That's coming to Kickstarter, The Legend of Kingdom Come. Word Balloon is also presented by my listeners, the League of Word Balloon listeners. The help that I get via contributions from Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. You hear the entertainment that I provide from Word Balloon every day, that I do a new episode. I am very fortunate to have the great creators of comics and pop culture willing to come on and give you great entertainment. I hope you will consider making an actual cash contribution via Patreon, even $1 a month. But really, if Word Balloon is worth the price of a comic book a month to you, it would be greatly appreciated if you slide that extra money you would put on an issue of a comic book to Word Balloon via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Okay, and I know we got the costume contest after this, so we're unfortunately going to have to... At first I'm like, hey, we got all the time. I'm like, no, costume. Costume contest at 4, so we'll get started. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you're enjoying Terrificon. My name's John Suntress. I host a podcast called Word Balloon. It's at wordballoon.com, and I've had the pleasure of having all three of our panelists on in one-on-one conversations. And if you like what you hear here, there's only more of it at wordballoon.com. I hope you'll check out more of our podcasts, both video and audio. But this is the DC All-In panel, and DC is about to go through some interesting changes once Absolute Power, Mark Waid's excellent story, finishes, and some of the fallout will be represented in some of these books. So if I may, I will start immediately to my right. Everybody, we love him. We've enjoyed his runs on Batman, Superman, the entire DC Universe, many events. Scott Snyder. Next to Scott, another great writer who's only recently been killing it at DC. Excited for what he's got coming up in store. Jason Aaron. and you'll forgive the characterization, but one of the guys who came from left field, and we're like, who is this guy? And then he does an epic run on Superman, a fantastic book called The Last God that, if you haven't read it, is absolutely incredible, beyond a lot of other things. And he's going to take over, right now, Green Lantern War Journal, but he's going to be taking over a key book in the DC universe. Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Yeah. Scott, I'm going to start with you because obviously, as I understand it, you and Josh Williamson are the architects of the Absolute line that is going to start in the fall. You're returning to a Batman, but I'll let you say as much as you want about it, with Nick Dragata doing the art. And tell us about the basic shape of the new status quo, and then tell us about Batman.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thanks so much for coming. I know there's a million things to do with this convention. I was here a few years ago, and to see it grow this much is awesome. It was way smaller last time I was here, so it's always wonderful to see something like blossom like this. But yeah, so just to be clear what All In is, when I was at DC for a number of years, it felt like one of the most kind of exciting things that happened was we did these initiatives. An initiative is slightly different than an event, right? An event is just a story, which I love doing them with metal and death metal and those things. But it kind of creates like a limited space for new things on the other side. But an initiative is like when the entire company comes together and says we're all going to take a swing at the same time. It's like when we did the New 52 or we did Rebirth. It was sort of every book is taking a big swing at once. And they can have different feels. They're always about something, right? And so when the New 52 was about trying all these new things, and then Rebirth felt like it was about going back to classic and legacy. And so when I left DC, Marie and the people there were very kind about do you want to come back and do a book at some point? And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't really figure out a book I wanted to do, but I missed being a part of those things. And it was especially at this moment when it felt like the cultural conversation out there in the world was all about how superheroes were over, right? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe had just kind of crescendoed. And so it was this feeling of all these think pieces about how superheroes are done. And it just felt like there were all this great stuff happening in superhero comics that should be celebrated. And so we decided, let's do an initiative where we could do the priorities of the New 52 and Rebirth at the same time, where we'd celebrate classic, legacy, epic storytelling happening in the greatest kind of continuing saga ever in the main line. And then we would also give a space to do big, daring reinventions of our characters to keep them new and exciting and dangerous and all those things for a new generation of readers. And so Josh and I started talking about, let's tell us, it all has to start with a story. So we said, let's try and tell a story in a couple years. It's been planned since 2 New Yorks ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so almost 3 years. And we'll give everybody plenty of time, but what we want to do is create one giant seismic moment when everyone is starting a new story, the story they would like to tell, their biggest swing on their own terms, but we'll create a story that allows for that, where the cosmology of the DC universe is sort of reshaped. So the main universe continues with new jumping on points, some new creative teams, some existing creative teams staying on. And then we also create a new universe called the Absolute Universe. And that would be a place where creators could come in and do really different, daring, kind of true to core always, but ambitious takes on these characters and, tell a passionate personal story. And so Jason has been a wonderful kind of co-architect in that zone. So it's been a real joy. So we're really excited. The goal, again, of the entire initiative, there's no retcon, there's no reboot. It's just if you're loving DC Comics, all the stuff you like is probably continuing, but with new story arcs or new jumping on points. There'll be some new books, some new creative teams, but it was all on sort of the creator's terms. And then the idea is to get you in every week. Every single week there's going to be a new story starting in a book, whether it's a kind of book that is, an absolute book where you see a reimagining of the characters, or in the main books. So it's a celebration of superhero comics all at once to show all the different kinds of superhero storytelling that can happen, and to just invite you guys to join one big party week after week at your local store. So we're very excited about it.
Did I absentmindedly call Absolute Ultimate when?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. I hope not.
I know you did.
And if I did, I apologize. But both of you have distinct new looks for the characters. Obviously, with Scott, it's Scott's returning to Batman, but it's a different Batman with Nick Dragata. So first I'll ask Jason, but again, also get Phil in here to say a few things. But Jason, my guy, we've seen just one image so far. And remind me again who the artist is on Absolute Super.
The interior artist, Rafa Sandoval.
Is that his image that they've released so far of Superman?
In terms of like the main cover for issue 1, it's the like Superman sort of standing in a field of wheat.
Rocking the long hair again. The long hair's back.
Yes, long hair, different looking suit, cape's different. A lot of things are different. Which on the one I'll say, all those things are different for a reason, right? We didn't change his costume just because it looks cool. It does look cool. I think it looks really cool. I think his long hair looks cool, but that long hair says something about his personality. That cape, the symbol. Like the differences in the suit, those all have meaning and significance. I'm not going to just tell you what the meaning and significance is, even though I really, really want to. Super want to. But all those things will be revealed in time as the book goes along. Not just in issue 1, but I mean, there's surprises in issue 1, there's surprises in issue 5 and 6, there's a big surprise in issue 12. And I think, like Scott said, we've been talking about this, he and I have been talking about this for over a year now.
Yeah.
I think when we first started talking about it, we weren't even talking about books, like we were talking about ideas for the characters, and I pretty quickly said, I think, I really want to do Superman, because Superman's have been a part of my life really as long as I've been reading comics. The first comics I ever read were Superman comics, were World's Finest and DC Comics Presents and issues of Superman. I've still got the chunk of, Kryptonite where I sent $3 away in the ad. In the back of the comic, I've still got the comic that I cut the ad out of. That I sent off.
It's a straight up painted rock, right?
It's a rock painted green, but you hold it up to a light bulb for like a minute and then it'll glow.
It glows.
Fluorescent.
I mean, it's probably.
I hope you don't catch something
lead paint.
from that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't put it in my mouth. I don't do that.
That's good.
But I've still got that thing. I've still got the Superman night light that was plugged into my room. I don't plug it anymore because it smells a little like fire when I do so.
Oh dear.
But I've kept all those things and I pulled them out, and sat with them. Like I'm super nostalgic. I like the power that comes from, when I was writing Thor, I would pull out Kirby Thor comics, and just hold them and read them. And so I take a lot of power, inspiration from that. And Superman is one of the reasons I read comics, one of the reasons I'm sitting here as a comic book writer. So this is the kind of opportunity I knew doesn't come along very often. I was actively not looking for an ongoing series at DC. I'm like, let me just do a couple of miniseries and sort of see what it's like over there. And then Scott called me and we started talking about it, and I was like, oh man, I can't walk away from this. I have to do this. And then just has been more exciting the deeper we dive into it, just how bold I think we're being of really reimagining these characters for today. My motivation with Superman is what does this character look like if he was created in 2024, not 1938? How does that change his story? And it does in a lot of ways. So much is different in this. Like I've said, the only spoiler I give you is that Krypton blows up, but assume everything else could be different. About his parents, about Krypton itself, his life there, what happened once he came to Earth, when he came to Earth, what it's been like for him since then, how his powers work. All those things are different, but at the same time, like Scott said, we're not trying to change what makes these characters who they are. The heart of Superman is still there. He's not running around, ripping people apart. This is not like a dark, dangerous, violent Superman. There's definitely, he's more raw, there's more of an edge to him, but it's still the heart of who makes Superman is still there.
Excellent. That's great. Phillip is not doing an absolute book, but he is taking over one of the key teams of the DC universe.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. While the absolute universe is coming to fruition finally with these awesome creative teams, I'm going to be holding down the fort with the classic Batman and Robin title. And when they approached me about doing that, also it's hitting on October when all the other books are starting to come out, and when they approached me about doing that, I just recently come off my Superman run, and I mean, Superman and Batman were always my guys growing up. And just to get the opportunity to do Batman now too is just an absolute dream come true. But for it to be the Batman and Robin book, I told him up front, I was like, I've been reading the Josh Williamson Batman and Robin, and he's got like a super like fun, quippy, slick kind of a style from that book that Simone is perfect for as an artist. And I said, if I get to do Batman, I've got such a different take though. I want like a foggy, rainy, like detective noir story. Like I keep coming back to these issues that I read as a kid. There was one of the most important issues to me was one that came the first year or two after Jason Todd had died, and there was an issue where Alfred was kind of coming down on Batman. Like I'm passionate about a lot these days. Like you're coming home like, oh, stabbed, your knuckles are busted, and like you're solving everything with your fists now. Like use your mind, like your fists. And through that issue, we see him trying. He's in his mind. He keeps saying like, use your mind, like your fists. And as he's taking out all these bad guys, he keeps trying to keep his aggression in check. It's all about the detective story, And that is kind of my theme for the book. Like I really want it to be a detective story. So forgive me if you were at my last panel, I talked about this sometime. I come from the world of music before I came to comics, and there's this line of Thelonious Monk's that he would sometimes say. He would tell people, revere the melody, speaking as an improviser, as he builds this amazing work from his composition. He like improvise this gigantic solo. He would start from the theme and kind of build it out, and build upon it, and make this big, amazing, unique thing out of it, and kind of spiral back in towards the theme at the end. The theme for me, man, for Batman is that making it a detective story, a noir story. So I've introduced this new villain named Memento. I'm extremely proud of. It's kind of a Jack the Ripper / Aleister Crowley kind of a character that really just brings a new kind of darkness to the city. And with kind of a true detective kind of a setup, we see these flashbacks to when Bruce was roughly Damien's age, when he was on this walkabout in London, comparing Bruce and Damien at similar ages, and how this character kind of ties them together, and this big mystery that's going to go on for quite some time. Everyone might remember, you know, I like long-form stories, and we'll bring such a different feel, inspired by Court of Owls, if I may say so.
Thank you.
And also Long Halloween, and Doom That Came to Gotham, and kind of the vibe of Gotham by Gaslight. I'm so excited for everyone to see what's coming. So yeah, we're holding down in classic Gotham and just making it look like I want it to look, And I don't know, plus I know Scott's writing well enough to know that there will be detective elements in Absolute as well, but like just the sheer physicality of that new Batman, I feel like this Batman and Robin story will give us a really, really fun contrast for readers to experience.
Excellent. I talk to these guys all the time, and I can do it on my podcast, but really this is your opportunity to ask questions. So if you don't mind lining up by the microphone, if you have questions, if you don't, we can continue and we'll have a lovely conversation. So if you're thinking about a question, I'll continue. And I want, first of all, Scott, did Nick have a table here this weekend, or was he just hanging out?
No, he was hanging out.
Okay.
Nick Dragata, the artist on Absolute Batman, he was the first person I called when I was thinking of doing it, and I was part of me almost hoped he'd say no, because I felt like if he said no, I wasn't sure I was going to do it.
Oh, wow.
But he jumped right in and was like, I hope you're offering me this. And so the take on Batman is, and when I wrote him in the main universe, I wrote him for myself. I wrote him to face all these fears that I was having. Like Court of Owls is really about me being terrified by the legacy and history of Batman and feeling unprepared for that, being plucked up from nowhere to write Batman. And that's what the Court of Owls is, right? They're the history come to life, being like, you're tiny and insignificant and you shouldn't be doing this. And every arc of Batman was like that. But I always wanted to write a version of Batman that I felt would be like to my kid, for my kids, and not as a kid book, but the way Year One or Dark Knight, those things spoke to me as a kid because they were dark and they were gripping, but they also contended with things out in the world that felt real to me at that time.
Sure.
And so here, this Bruce, to me, my kids, I have a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and we also have a 5-year-old. So But for the 17-year-old, I look at him and his friends, and they're looking out at a world that feels really rough, right? They have a lot of things in place that feel compromised, or big kind of problems that feel almost just too entrenched to kind of move. And yet I see all this hope with them. Like they go out there and they're fiery and they want to change things. And so I wanted to write a Batman like that, but a Batman that comes from nothing. I love when he has all the resources and gadgets. I always had fun. I was like, what kind of new gadget can he have this week? And what new vehicle? But I wanted to do something now where it's like, being a billionaire is not very cool to my teenager. And so the idea was, I've always wanted to write a Batman that came up working class. Like, what if Bruce and his parents didn't have money, never had money, didn't lose it, but they're just regular blue-collar people in Gotham. Martha works in the mayor's office, and Thomas is a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Bruce grows up rough and tumble in Crime Alley with a bunch of people that you might recognize as well, and who just came up with him in the neighborhood. And so he has a different group of friends, and he doesn't have to hide as Batman as the facade of Bruce Wayne, because Bruce Wayne is nobody in this world. He's an engineer, and he's worked all over the city to learn it. So he worked in the sewers and the power plant. And he stashed stuff all over. He's like a guerrilla fighter.
Okay.
But because he doesn't have to wear a tuxedo and pretend to be like a playboy, he can be giant. So he's very big. He's sort of like Dark Knight Returns Batman, but he's like 20. So he's young and he's fast and he's super smart, but he's also intimidating because he has to be, because he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have cars, and he does have a Batmobile that's awesome. You'll see an issue too. But like the fun of it was to make him dangerous and scary to the bad guys, because the bad guys have more resources in this, have more power. It's almost like an inversion of the series where instead of Batman being like order and the system and the villains being chaos and this stuff, Batman is chaos. Batman's the monkey wrench. Batman disrupts things. He's the thing that says, all these things you don't think you can change, let's change them, or we burn them down to make them something new.
Wow.
And so he's very wild in it, and I love him. He's like very unpredictable. He's more violent. He doesn't kill. He would never kill, but he is definitely like a little over the edge. And he just goes hard. And so Nick, when I called him, his style is like this really great mix of like this kinetic kind of manga-looking sensibility, but it's also really can be very grounded and muted, like almost like Mazzucchelli Year One type looking inks. And so it was like, if you can marry those things and make it feel young and fresh and fast and out there, but also bring that groundedness to Gotham and make it look, gritty, we'd have something really special. And he's doing it, and it's just unbelievable. But he lives here in Connecticut, right across the sound from where I live in Port Jefferson. And so he comes over on the ferry, and we work in my studio together.
That's great.
And just put the stuff all up on the walls. And so he just came to go over issue 3 together.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we were just hanging out yesterday in the room and going over it, and he just came down to sign a few things, but that was why he was here. He was just staying with me for a night.
That's great, because truly, I'm like, wait, your God, he should be on the panel. I'm like, what the hell? And it's like, I don't think he's tabling. And so, no, that's excellent. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of fresh ideas, because, again, your run is such an epic run on Batman, and everything that you and Greg and others have done. Is this Nick's first crack at Batman, or am I misremembering? Okay,
he did one short in a Batman black and white, but that's really the only time he's done anything.
Okay, because for some reason it's probably the other Nick that I'm thinking of with Batman Legacy and Bendis.
Oh yeah, no, Darrington.
Oh, Nick Darrington, of course.
Yeah.
See, there you go. And I do that all the time, Dragata and Darrington. So, okay. Phillip, who's drawing Batman and Robin?
Javi Fernandez.
Excellent.
He's so good.
Yeah.
Born to draw Batman. He did, was it called Nightwing Reborn? Is that correct? Like in 2017 or something? He did some Nightwing stuff, like not so long ago. That was terrific. But if you just look at his stuff, he did. He's been drawing Batman like fan art and commissions and stuff forever, and it just looks unbelievably dope. He's just born to draw Batman, and especially the Batman 9 edition in my own mind. There's this scene in the first, spoilers, whatever, I can do what I want. In the first issue, there's a scene in which there's this rich guy thing happening, and like the building, and there's bad guys in the building, and he doesn't have access to any of his gear, and he just has this, as Scott was saying, he's got a gadget, and he has control over all the power grids in the city, so he like kills the power and uses the darkness as his mask. And just to see how he draw Batman, like in the shape of Bruce, but with the darkness looking like Batman fighting, taking guys down. It just looks, oh god. He's got that awesome, almost like a David Aja kind of style, sort of like that reality, so epic looking. God, I love every page that comes back. Like I've been giving him these crazy action sequences, just like so much detail in the pages, and he just makes everything work. Like I can't wait for everyone to see it.
Stevie, are you my clock? I just want to make sure. Okay, good. I just want to make sure we had somebody that was going to be running our clock. Very, very good. Jason, this isn't your first crack at Superman. You just had a short but fantastic 3-issue arc with, was it Action?
Yep.
And a great Bizarro story in particular.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I had to follow Phillip, who had a long, amazing run.
Oh, we'll get to Phil's run, but yeah.
And yeah, I did. Like I said, I've been exclusive to Marvel for like 15, 16 years. So once I knew I didn't want to renew that exclusive, I was a DC kid. Like I said, I got into reading comics because of DC books. So I've wanted to crack at those characters for a long time. So I knew the first thing I wanted to do was a Batman book. So I did the Batman Off-World, which is a Batman in Space story, which is very much an homage to books like New Teen Titans and Omega Men and Atari Force, which were some of those books that I pulled off the spinner rack that made me fall in love with comics. And then I got asked to do, the 3 issues on Action, and I wasn't expecting that and couldn't say no. Like I coming to DC, I knew. Almost like I knew I wanted to write Superman, but I was almost afraid of Superman, and getting that call and getting asked to do that, for me, despite having done this professionally for almost 20 years now, I felt really intimidated in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Like, I'm about to put words in the mouth of Superman, right? Like, so I did what anybody would do in that situation, and I called Mark Waid and told him, like, this is my idea. Is this okay? And I got, Mark said, yep, you're good. And then it did the same thing when we started talking about Absolute Superman. I was like, especially with this, where there's so much that's different, right? And we're changing so much.
Yeah.
But again, it's, you don't want to lose, like, the heart of who this character is. And I think there's a lot of heart in this story. I mean, I've said the Thor at Marvel's probably the superhero thing I'm the most proud of, and I think there's a lot of heart there. That's the first book I did where I do signings and people come up and they're crying and I'm crying and we're all crying. So I want this Absolute Superman to be for my time at DC what Thor was for my time at Marvel. So there's a lot of heart in it, so you don't want to lose that. So again, I sent my whole long Bible to Mark Waid just to make sure I wasn't off base, and Mark dug it. So, so I it's cool to, like, again, despite having done this for a long time, I've written a lot of different, characters at Marvel and Star Wars and Turtles, and getting to come to DC for the first time in a big way, and this now being my first, like, ongoing series that I plan on, putting down roots and staying on until Scott and I get fired, until, like, whatever. Like I plan on being around for a long time. It feels really good. It feels like I'm a kid again, like that same kid who bought that hunk of kryptonite, like excited to finally get my hands on Superman.
Phillip, as Jason said, you completed this epic run on Superman. We had him in space, we had him fighting gladiatorial battles, and then we also expanded the family. And really, this is great because really since New 52, there almost was, and Scott can maybe talk to this more, but there was almost like no one could really be friendly with each other. Everyone's got to be an outlaw. And it's like Superboy's pissed at Superman, and Supergirl's pissed at Superman, or at least that's what it seemed. And it's like, oh no, man, it's a family and everything. So you really brought the family back, and you got Connor in the family as well, so the other Superboy, and the 2 kids that Superman brings back with him and stuff. So I don't know if you want to reflect on your time at Superman.
Yeah, sure. Well, so Bendis had been writing Superman in Action for a while before my time, and he had done such a great, thorough job of, like, humanizing Superman and the whole cast. Like, there was a lot of time spent in the day-to-day, like, running the David Planet. It was like, it really got into a lot of the supporting cast.
Yep.
It's like all these really human moments, and it felt like a really ripe time to make Superman like really super, like send him into space in this gigantic, crazy Spartacus space epic, you know. And it was extremely, so again, like Revere the Melody was all about just I really dug into the whole concept of champion of the oppressed, like that line from the first Action Comics issue. I just kind of hung my hat the whole run on that thing. Like, so Superman's the champion of the oppressed. I wanted to see more of that, just Christopher Reeve style, like almost corny, just like virtue, like where I want to hear John Williams on every page. Just, you know, look up into the sky and see the sun shining with Superman in front of it, and, you know, just, I want more of that feeling where you just, and you put the book away and you just feel amazing, like I want to be what that is, you know. So it was a lot of Superman, and there were people who missed, you know, Jimmy and Superboy and Kara and everybody else. But the story was so Superman-centric, and it was all off-world, and it was all about, like, is it his powers that makes him who he is, you know? Like, can he still be Superman if he's just in the mud, getting kicked around like the rest of us, just trying to save all these other people who are just as weak as he is? Is he still Superman? Can he still have his ability to inspire everyone to, like, rise up and, like, just, you know, be that truth and justice thing, you know, champion of the oppressed? So when he came back from that whole, well, I should also add that run went a long time. Like, there were editors like, okay, how long is he going to be out there? Like, we are going to get it back to the status quo. Like, just one more second. And like at the time, my editor on the book at that time left during the Warworld saga, and it was supposed to wrap up by May, and then they left, and then the new editor came on. I was like, okay, when is this going to end? Like, it's going to go till July. And then that editor also left. It was like, okay, now it's looking like October. Like, hey, you guys, it's going to be October. And someone were like, come on, get it back. Like, look, you gave me like all these characters from the Authority. You've got everybody needs an arc. Everybody's got to contribute. It's like we're not trying to. I kind of had my Independence Day speech moment a few times where it was like, you know, we're not trying to sell the best Action Comics 1046 ever. Like, we're trying to tell freaking Watchmen. You know, like, we're trying to make a book that's evergreen, that lasts forever, that is a statement on what Superman is, like nailed to the church door forever about what Superman is. So we made this gigantic epic, and we brought him back as fan service. I really wanted to give, you know, make Action Comics almost like a homage to the old, like, Super Family Giant books, you know. So we made not an anthology, but we had a couple of backups in the back, and we really kind of celebrated the whole Super Family. So I wanted to bring in Connor and, you know, Jimmy and Lois and Kenan and everybody else, just really make it like a proper Super Family, kind of a celebration of all the things that the Super Family can be. And man, I just can't be more grateful that I got to do that. I mean, Superman means everything to me, and Batman does too. They represent such different power fantasies for me growing up. I mean, Batman was always the one that teaches us to look inward and, like, make ourselves, turn ourselves into this thing that is bigger and greater, that we can put ourselves on like toe-to-toe with gods. You know, we can just make ourselves into this thing through sheer force of will, make ourselves a force of nature. And Superman is the one that teaches us to look up, you know, like that teaches us to try to do more in that way, like to remind us that, you know, we could be capable of great things someday. You know, to get to that, to take a swing at both of those characters who were collectively like my dad growing up, like just the guy that I wanted both of those guys. I just wanted to be like both those guys so bad, and to get to write those books as these guys have done so eloquently is just a tremendous honor, and I do not intend to waste it.
If you haven't read Phillip's Last God, that's a terrific story as well, and also stuff he's done for other publishers. And I know this is a DC All-In thing, but I do want to ask, again, if you guys have questions, I'm going to ask things about non-DC things. Good. Oh, we have somebody. Sir, please.
I didn't want to keep my voice on.
No worries.
I'm very excited for this All-In initiative. I'm very big on getting new comic book writers in, and I think that just opens it up. I'm very excited for it. That includes the absolute universe as well. My question is essentially, with this new universe, you're kind of allowed to do almost whatever you want. Can we expect to see some new characters, brand new characters, take on the titles of classic characters? That's what.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we haven't announced everything yet, book-wise. So right now we've announced Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and I think Green Lantern and Flash.
Have you announced the teams yet for those books?
Yeah, like Batman is, we said Batman and Superman. Wonder Woman is Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman.
Oh, great.
Green Lantern is Al Ewing and Janoi, I forget Janoi's last name. Janoi Lindsay, thanks.
Okay. Equally great.
Yes, and Flash is Jeff Lemire and Nick Robles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so but there are other books coming that have might have some other changes, like some of the things you're talking about. But one of the goals really wasn't we didn't really want to create a universe where we were sort of making new people the characters in that way, because it felt like the challenge was to take these characters and their sort of origin stories and keep them true to core, but yet make them feel new and make them feel like their mission has a different energy because they're up against things that feel particularly relevant, even if they're still comic book crazy and like translated into the biggest epic space terms possible. So yeah, like Kal-El or Kal is Kal-El, is Superman is Kal-El, and Bruce Wayne is Batman, and Diana is Wonder Woman.
But I mean, I approach this like the absolute stuff like no one should be where they're supposed to be, right? Like in Superman's world, everybody we encounter in any of the supporting cast or bad guys, nobody's where you expect them to be, right? Like everything's kind of wrong and off with this world, this universe. And and I wanted to do a Superman story that doesn't open in Metropolis, doesn't open in the Daily Planet, doesn't open in Kansas, doesn't open with the rocket coming from Krypton. Like it opens in Brazil in a diamond mine. And the bits we see of Krypton in the first issue are different than the Krypton we've seen before. So again, like we all know the tropes of these stories, right? You know the big moments from Batman's origin and Superman's origin and Wonder Woman's, but these are we're without changing who those characters are, we're still doing stories that I think are full of surprises. And that extends to like Flash is a crazy awesome pitch, and Al's ideas for Green Lantern are insane, as you would expect with Al Ewing. And that'll extend to the other books coming. Again, everything we're talking about is like, how do we do this in a way that feels fresh and daring, and it's not just, another version of the same story we know. Like, let's do stories none of us have seen and read before. And I think everybody who's a part of this is leaning into that. Everybody's swinging for the fences, and we all kind of have started to talk and inspire and excite each other and realize it really feels like it's just all of us in a room, like, we can kind of do what we want to do, with these characters. Like, this is our version. Like, let's go crazy with it.
Cool, excellent. Do you people right there? Are you questioning people, or are you just hanging out? You're all hanging out. Okay, cool. I just don't want to miss anybody that might have a question. Obviously, if you have more questions, please step up to the microphone. Again, I do want to acknowledge some of the other things these guys have been doing. And Scott, my God, your time away from DC, your Best Jacket imprint, and what you've been doing with them, and Comixology. Are all the books done?
Not all. They're not all done yet. We're going to announce. We have like a
couple more coming.
A couple things, to still do.
Good.
But the fun was like when I left DC. Every year I kind of fought for a carve out that I was at DC whenever I signed a new contract with them to do independent work, and then I never used it after they gave it to me, just because I was so invested in the series I was doing there. And so the goal was to just be like, just take a few years and just do a creative walkabout and do every sort of idea in my head, whether it was, small, intimate thrillers like, Dark Spaces, Wildfires, or big kind of over-the-top horror like White Boat or We Have Demons, and just have fun and not worry at all about, not worrying about the sales or being in the spotlight or any of that stuff. Just really try and do stuff for myself for a bit. And then now it just felt like, last year, a couple years ago, I just started to get the itch to be like, you know what, I really feel like this would be fun I feel like the urge to go back and work in that, in that language of superheroes a bit, and to do horror. And so it almost feels like coming home and coming back and trying to do things with now all these lessons that I feel like I learned from my time in creator-owned comics about my own, creative leanings and limitations and all that, and like bring them full force to some stuff that is the kind of stuff that I'm more known for in that way.
All right, my two favorites of Best Jacket that you did mention are Canary with
thanks,
Damp Motion, fantastic Western if you guys don't know. And was it Barnstormers? Barnstormers with Tua Lote, right?
Yeah.
Man, and I don't know, man. Early World War I flyers and the Daredevils of the post-World War I era. I'm a sucker for that stuff, and really, Scott and Tula just nailed the idea. And maybe I don't know about the rest of you, but as I get older, I still love superheroes. Don't get me wrong. But it really, as I grew up, I'm like, I just like the comic book format. I want to read other stories. So first, I gravitated to European things, but then all of these people, have done amazing non-superhero stories. My God, Scott, of course, we really didn't mention it. Of course, American Vampire, the Great Vertigo series, amazing. Jason has been doing a lot of great things, including Sorry for Children in the Ice, The Goddamn, which is a very interesting take on the Bible era in a very different spin. And
Don't go read that with your children.
yeah, exactly. Maybe not that one. But Phillip, Last God, I really, again, I want people to be aware of it and stuff. So talk a little bit about Last God.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Last God, which is now called the Feldspar Chronicles, Book 1.
Sorry, okay.
Turn the title around because of a copyright thing, but had nothing to do with. So Last God, Book 1 of the Feldspar Chronicles is my epic fantasy horror book. That, if you were to boil it down to a single statement, it's basically like, what if the Fellowship failed? And there follows this group of heroes who became the kings and queens of this high fantasy world, somewhere between Tolkien and Robert E. Howard. And it turns out it was all a big lie, and they actually committed this terrible war crime. And as this cosmic horror thing comes back into the world through the bodies of these heroes, the kings and queens, this new generation of characters kind of gets swept up into this adventure, and they have to do what their heroes claim to have done, and actually kill the last god, and find the Black Stair, and find the god in the void, and all this, high fantasy stuff, but darker than you're typically seeing. Very proud of it. Riccardo Federici with the art, and he's just a virtuoso. That guy is unbelievably great. There's a ton of back matter at the end of every issue. I did a lot of, there was so much, I was writing like 100 words for every word on the page. And when my editors discovered how much there was, they're like, what are they, does this thing actually say something, or is this gibberish? Like, no, here's the glossary. Like, these are the different tribes of Elva, what they're saying, and they're like, how much of this is there? And they're like, do you want to do a few extra pages in the back of every issue? So we have like original songs and sacred texts and journals, and the Dust Jacket is this giant map, and there's just an unthinkable amount of work. But it was so rewarding and fun. It's actually kind of like the Batman and Robin story we're doing. There's an almost True Detective style flashback, flash forward thing going on, where we see the adventure of the new Fellowship, but also we see what actually happened 30 years earlier, back and forth, and we see them take similar but very different paths. And it was great fun. When I found out that Riccardo Federici could do the art, he has this incredible like Conan kind of art style, but he's also like a horror savant. So we have this like Lord of the Rings meets Cronenberg kind of body horror stuff that happens. It's super nuts. So very proud of it. So you see the Feldspar Chronicles out there. I'm very proud of that book, and both Riccardo and I very much want to do more. We're kind of keeping Riccardo and I hopping on licensed stuff right now, but we both want to do more, so we'll do more books with that.
You mentioned music that you composed. Did you ever record the music?
We did, yeah, some of it.
And is it available for us to check out on Spotify or something?
So we did record some trailers actually for the book when it first came out. So could I sing you some? Yeah, there's I suppose I could. There's a song called Petal Black, Petal Gray. So there's the bad guys in the thing. Like there's this creature called the Flowering Dead. And there's like a nursery, like kind of like a London Bridge is falling down, kind of like creepy little nursery rhyme kind of thing that they sing, like petal black and petal gray, petal took my mama away, if she come back the very next day, you can live and that goes on. But let's see, what's another one? Mama, Dad, come back again. I forget how it goes exactly, but it goes on and on. It's really creepy and makes you kind of scrub yourself. It's like when you actually listen to what they're saying, very much like some of the old creepy English nursery rhymes. They can get a little dark. But yeah, we have. There's a song called. It's like a lullaby that the elves sing, which is basically it's like a song it's a prayer for sleep. What it actually means is to not be awakened again, to not be reanimated.
Sure.
It's a song that they sing to kind of put the dead to rest. Anyway, so there are lots of songs like that, and I printed it in music you could actually play and sing if you wanted to, but I also wrote out a new musical notation that they would use in world, because it's not like they know Western notation there. I'm psycho, so I just keep going down the rabbit hole until it's done. So anyway, I digress.
That's awesome. Jace, I got to give it up to you for Thor, because if you saw Love and Thunder but didn't read Jason's run, no disrespect to the movie, but I really think they handled the Janus Thor thing much better than the movie that you did. And also that you took the time, and I've said this to you before, that it was during your run that a lot of other characters suddenly became the heroes. Amadeus Cho became the Hulk, and that was the first time that Sam Wilson was being Cap and things like that. And what I loved about your run in particular was the Odin son, the original Thor, still had a story while we were discovering and enjoying what was happening to Jane. And first of all, yeah, Jane with all these new powers, but if Thor doesn't have access to the hammer and he's not Thor anymore, exactly what is he? So, if you don't mind talking about that beyond my explanation.
Sure. Yeah. I wrote Thor for like 7 years, and I loved doing the stuff with Thor Odin's son with Esad Ribic on art, which was like the kind of Thor you'd see spray painted on the side of a van, like a heavy metal Thor. Yeah. But I always wrote him as for me, I've been an atheist for more than half my life, so it's like, okay, I'm the guy writing Marvel's preeminent god, and I very much wanted to lean into the godness of it.
Sure.
Right? The book was called Thor, God of Thunder. Like that's one of the fundamental things about Thor that makes him different from Cap and Spider-Man and everybody else. He is literally a god, not just an alien who's perceived as a god, but I wrote him as a god and leaned into that right out of the gate. And at the first issue, he answers somebody's prayers, which we'd never seen him do before, right? But I always wrote him as the kind of God I would like to believe in, of this is a guy who wakes up every morning and he knows he was worthy yesterday, right? He picked up that hammer and he flew around and he saved the world. But when he wakes up the next day, he looks at it and he doesn't, until he picks it up, he doesn't know if he's going to be worthy today. Like constantly questioning his own worthiness, like that's what motivates him. And as part of that, I knew someday he's going to wake up and he can't lift it, right? And like, what does that mean? What story does that send him off on? And then of course that opens the door for somebody else to come along and pick it up. And that was always meant to be Jane, who I'd already established was battling breast cancer.
Yes.
And so that gave me the chance to do what I think was the most quintessentially Marvel of any Marvel story I ever did, where it's like, she's got a secret identity. She's every time she lifts the hammer, it's like neutralizing the effects of her cancer treatment. It's making her sicker, and she's trying to keep this from everybody. And if she throws the hammer and it doesn't come back to her quick enough, she'll change into like a sickly, 90-pound woman battling cancer, right? So yeah. That's like classic Stan and Jack kind of Marvel stuff. And so I had so much fun with that. I mean, she's also, it sounds dour, but it's like she's enjoying it. She's enjoying it more than ever because she knows I might die tomorrow, right? And she's getting to fly around and punch, Odin in the face. But again, it's like it's the heart of it, right? Like you can do stories about people punching each other in outer space, but like, do we care? You know, like you have to have something that you relate to. Whoever these characters are, whatever they're doing, like we have to feel like there's real emotions there, right? It has to stir real emotions in us, and that's definitely I think the book I've done that's done that the most, you know.
Scott, for in the same vein of Jane taking over for Thor, the first, Beyond American Vampire, the first story a lot of us paid attention to, no disrespect to other stories, but was the Black Mirror story in Detective, where Bruce is dead and Dick has to take over as Batman, and it's the most, as the agency that Jason gave to Jane as Thor. Dick, listen, we all love Dick Grayson. He is the greatest, guy in the DC. Just all the heroes respect him, whether it's from Young Justice to the Justice League. But this was really a great, and they've had, there was Prodigal right after Nightfall, where Dick for a while is Batman. But this really was a different Batman because it was Dick Grayson. If you could talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it was a blast because Dick Grayson is a character who wears his heart on his sleeve and is like nervous and terrified and excited to be Batman, which like was the perfect fit for me because that's how I felt. And he also like told everybody that all the time in his thoughts, which made it so easy he was so easy to write for me because he just, he's stepping into this role that he thinks he knows he has to do. He's stepping in because Bruce is gone. And yet he's constantly terrified that he's not Batman, and he has to figure out his own way of doing it, and that Gotham is changing to face him versus the way it faced Bruce, that it's always this kind of antagonist that it's not evil, it just sort of it's like a fear generator where it brings your biggest fears to life for you to face, and if you do, it refines you as a hero. And so I loved writing him, and then I remember when I had another year planned, and then they said, Bruce is coming back, and we're doing a new 52, and do you want to do that? And I was like, I don't know how to, of course, I was terrified to do it. But I started writing Bruce, and it was so hard, because he doesn't tell you how he feels at all. And, you have Alfred being like, are you sure you're not worried, sir? And he'll be like, leave me alone, and just keep moving, And so it was so hard to try and figure out how to write Bruce emotionally because he's so badass in a lot of ways too, So I loved both, and I came to feel super comfortable writing Bruce, but Dick was a wonderful introduction to Gotham for all those reasons.
I can appreciate that. Yeah, it's a great book, and God, it's been so long. Maybe some of you haven't read Black Mirror. I would absolutely recommend going and get the collection for it and stuff.
It's so good.
Wonderful story. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just so good. Around the same time, I remember Scott talking about how somebody asked about on a panel that I was attending as a nerd. They asked him about his thoughts on Robin, and Scott talked about how he couldn't square the circle with Batman having Robin and putting his kids in danger and all that. As a father, it was like, Scott, I remember you talking about that, how that was challenging for you to write, and I was completely on the same page, and now I'm writing Batman and Robin, and I still remember that way. I still remember that, I still feel that way. And it's made writing Batman and Robin now such an interesting, compelling, complex challenge. Still feeling that way, how Batman handles that kind of thing. Showing after writing Superman is the ideal father.
The ultimate dad.
Writing Batman is just the worst kind of. How do you he and David are broken in such different ways, and it all kind of goes back to the stuff I remember Scott saying years ago.
Alfred is the nexus as we are close to wrapping up, and God, it's so important to Dick because he really was the nurturer that Bruce wasn't. And, he has a great, crazy relationship with Damian as well, who calls him Pennyworth, doesn't call him Alfred. So is, sadly, Alfred still dead in our worlds?
You might find, I can't spoil that one.
That's fair. All right, no. Hey, man, we want our Christmas presents on December 25th.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
I think we got another question.
Oh, good. All right, last question, real fast, please.
I just had a question about the getting the creative teams for the new Absolute books. Was it more of an open pitch style? Who has an idea to do a new Flash, a new Green Lantern, or did you have or the powers that be have a list? We want Jeff Lemire doing Flash, and we're going to bug him about it.
No, I think it was a bit of both. I think there was discussion internally about who had expressed interest at different times about doing some things on characters that felt like they were really, really daring. and there were creators that we'd want to work with. So it was a little bit of both. Like sometimes, like Jason was the first person I went to about any of it, and was like, look, I would love somebody who's like a partner essentially in figuring out the feel of this and that. And Lemire, who was involved in doing other stuff at DC, started asking, I have this wild Flash idea, is there a place to do it? And so that kind of came from the other side, So there was a lot of that, a lot of sort of, and some people pitched, and some things didn't work, and some things did, and so it was a big mix. It was a lot of just trying to welcome people in, and then also really respect what we were trying to do with it.
Excellent. Are we wrapping, or are we? I'm gonna ask one more question, unless the guys give me another point, and that is, for the absolute stuff. Oh, please go. Yes, please. No, go.
My name's Dante. Huge fan of all your work. I'm very excited for DC All In. In addition to all your work, which I already have your work and everything, I'm very excited for the question series that's coming out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there any obscure characters that you'd like to, tell stories about in this, All In initiative or in the Absolute Universe?
Without spoiling.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about doing another book or project beyond Superman, but yes, as a kid who grew up reading DC books voraciously, I have a long list of characters I think I would love to tackle from the ground up. The character has always been one of my favorites. This obscure DC character is Blue Devil.
Sure.
And I did the usual new writer thing where in my first issue of Action Comics I snuck Blue Devil in there for one panel. But that the character's changed a lot from kind of who he was when he first showed up in the 80s. So nobody's clamoring for a Blue Devil book except for me. Maybe someday.
We have to wrap, but I do want everyone to know when your book starts. So I know it's October, but
I think October 9th is Absolute Batman #1.
Okay. Do you know, Jace, which week in October for Superman?
The Superman's November. You get
November.
Batman and Wonder Woman in October, then Absolute Superman in November.
And Phillip, Batman and Robin?
Batman and Robin is October as well.
That's beautiful. So there you go, everybody. Absolute line and DC's All In initiative. It all sounds great. And there's three big reasons why it's going to be great. Thanks a lot for listening to us. Thank you. Hey, you got to come on.